I know.
Thanks. All right, welcome everyone. I'm really happy to have you all here. I'm involved in and supporting the Chagrin Documentary Film Fest. I'm Trish Sylvia. I'm a board member and also had the privilege of getting to help kind of coordinate some of these panel discussions that we're having. So this one particularly excited about. I want to thank our moderators and our panelists for being here. We've got Rick and Brenda Jackson. Rick, some of you may recognize, he's quite the celebrity from Idea Stream. He's got more accolades and awards than I can go into, and so thank you for being here. And his wife Brenda is a journalist also and helps the Chagrin Documentary Film Fest with our media. We have a director with us, Leena. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you all got to see the film and are on the back end here. And then two of our families in the community that we're excited about, Larry and Christina. So thank you all. And with that, I know we're excited to just get into the panel discussion, so I'll hand it over to you all.
Thanks, Trish. Was it great?
Yeah.
Give her a round of applause. We'll start there with the fact that she is a director of note, documentary filmmaker, award-winning photographer, deep expertise in the issues that intersect race, representation, and identity. Our locals here are the Lazzaros. Thank you for being here today. Larry is an equal opportunity advisor for the U.S. military. Thank you for your years of service, sir. Also working with civil rights. And Christina is new to Chagrin Falls, I understand?
Yes, we both just moved here
Right, she was active duty as well. They met on the job. We met on the job, so figure out how that works. So thank you for your service as well. You have a bachelor's degree in political science. You're going to take this conversation to places where we didn't know it was going to go. But also there is the opportunity, there's a microphone over there. At some point we'll open it up. If you have questions, you can just stroll over the microphone, we'll call on you. Brenda and I are kind of co-moderating it because not only are we both journalists, but we have a biracial job as well. So it kind of made sense for us to step into this space. And we'll mix some of our conversation in with yours as well, if that's okay by you.
Absolutely.
It's your show.
No.
I'm just asking.
You're the moderator.
I'm just the moderator. You're the star here. Okay. So Leena, thank you. It's kind of interesting to look at the film now and think, did these women just look around at their own families and say, hey, we need to talk about this? But actually, I understand this was in your brain for some time before you became.
Yeah, so most of my work is somewhat autobiographical. So if I am, whether it's my still photography or whether it's my movies, if I'm thinking about a topic or something that's happening, then it normally comes out in my creative work. And my son was born in 2009, and like, of course I had thought about my, being in an interracial relationship and all of that for many years, but I had never really thought about the impact until when our son was born. And after that, then things sort of shifted and changed in my head, and I was thinking, as any parent, like how do you parent so that your kid just grows up to being a kind human being? That's the #1 priority. But then all of these other things started to come, and I thought back on my own experiences of when I first started to realize about race. And we moved to Medina, Ohio, which is where I grew up in. Medina in 1980, and shortly after that was my first real racial experience, where the newspaper had done a big article on my dad. He was a doctor in town, and right after that, I was walking to school and somebody yelled out the bus window, "Where's your green card?" And I didn't know that was an insult, so I yelled back, "At home with my mom, where's yours?" Not any clue that was meant to be. I mean, we grew, at the time, Medina was not diverse at all. And so, we really stuck out. And so I was just thinking about, like, well, when is my son gonna start to experience those things, and what can I do with his identity formation, and how can I, help be a better parent if I know these things. And I had mentioned earlier that Katie and I worked together, but we didn't really know about each other. And then once the minute we met and started talking about this project, it was like we were of the same exact mind. And we have the same questions and the same journey, obviously very different because me being a woman of color and her being a white woman, we had different perspectives of that, but we really just connected immediately and we're trying to figure out how to do more projects together because we just really loved the experience.
Christina, I'm kind of wondering, when you saw mixed, were you more like, wow, other people go through that too? Or were you more like, about time somebody put it on film?
I think it's interesting and it's difficult and you guys really like honed in on the conversation, so I'm mixed. I look white, I present as like little season, and it is an awkward space to kind of be in, especially I moved from Jamaica where the social construct of race is entirely different from the US. So relearning all the ways and trying to figure out like where you fit in. It was nice to see it spoken about so openly because I don't know what other way to say it than it's so awkward so many times. Especially when you, like some people in the documentary said, like you look a certain way, people see a certain way, treat a certain way, but that doesn't mean that that's how I identify myself, that's not how I was raised. And that interesting aspect of different areas of the country and how people view it and operate and feel and experience it in different areas of the country. I see that so much between moving from Jamaica and then moving around to different parts of the States. Like it's been an interesting experience for sure, having to relearn the dynamics every time we move.
And we also didn't want to represent every, we're just representing each person's own mixed race experience, and that may not be the same as yours or your children, and it may actually not be the experience of my son as he gets older. So we wanted to make sure that we kind of got a wide berth around what mixedness was, just so that if somebody could see it, even if it was just for 15 seconds, like a glimpse of like, oh yeah, that's me, that's what I have. If the rest of it didn't work or wasn't applicable, that they could at least identify with one part of it. And we also wanted to make this film to start conversations about race because it is so difficult to talk about. And in our family, we talk about race all the time. My son, from very early on, we talked about race when he was probably 3 or 4, and Trayvon Martin was happening. We were talking about that in the house a lot. And at one point he came up to me and he said, Mommy, I've got a new game I want to play with you. I said, oh, what is it? He said, and he had his cars in his hand, and he said, it's called racism. I race my car and you race yours, but you never win. And I was like, do you know that's the truth? But then, then we just needed to start to talk about it as he gets older in more nuanced ways, and, to be age appropriate about it, and, just to get the conversation started. But I know for a lot of my friends, they don't talk about race. And so we're hoping that this film will be an easy, light way to get into having those kinds of conversations.
Larry, the film focuses on moms, and we've got moms here. You and I had different experiences. What resonated with you in the film?
I think one thing that highlighted for me that you said, and I'm not sure if it was you or the other, is we need advocates. Often we come off and we talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion or the hot topics or whatever is happening in our country. It's offensive because we're talking about it. But when we have someone that doesn't look like us but advocates for us, like the editor or the editor in Houston, that was such a moment for me that I connected with what you captured. Because we can preach this. And like today we're talking to a group of maybe folks who want to be here, who want to be part of the conversation, but how do we reach those people that don't want to be here? And that one part of the clip just really touched a point for us. We need advocates.
Kind of interesting to me that when you think about it, the situations that come up, the whole, how many in your party? Are these checks separate? I mean, Brenda and I have dealt with that we've been married for almost 40 years, so we've dealt with that.
You didn't have to say.
She was 6. But yeah, it's different now. We got married in the South. Probably, not that Brenda and I was, but there's a whole situation. We've seen that where people will walk up to us and give us separate checks.
But I was curious about where you were talking about advocates. in the society we're in, I see it personally as two pretty wide divide. We've got these folks over here who are open and interested in having a conversation and making change, and then there are people over here who are either don't want to hear about it, don't want to face it, don't believe in it, or they are afraid to step forward. Is that your experience? Are there people that you've met that maybe don't come forward?
I might refer to my political science major to help, but it has to do with the unknown, maybe not understanding, is my experience. When I talk with an individual, they just don't understand what, as mentioned in the film, what's over, or should be over, or it's past. It's not happening now. And Kristen, can you speak further on that?
I think it's changed so much too. So how racism, and I'm just gonna call it what it is, presents today is different from traditional racism that people assume we're talking about when we mention issues. And the stuff today is also so, it's difficult to articulate, it's difficult to explain like the lasting effects of, it's difficult to tell someone why drawing a wall in front of a kid on the playground isn't okay, what that does to them, how it alienates them from the rest of the group, what we expect the school or the teachers to step in and do. It's difficult to explain it to people in a meaningful way because they're just going to be like, well, kids get bullied. There's no way to explain if you don't have a reference for it, if you don't have any frame of what that means, if you don't have any frame of how that carries forward and all these other little tiny interactions constantly throughout the year, everyone, constantly. How can someone understand that? So then we're broken into two separate groups. When you get into that, there's like a group of people who don't understand, but when you explain it to them, like they start to open, and there are people who don't understand and don't want to understand. So there's like they don't want to understand because they're just simply going to deny any of the things that you're telling them. Didn't happen, it's not true, you're misunderstanding the situation over and over again, and how you connect with that, what do you do about it?
Leena, did you come across people when, once you explained what you were doing, they said, well, what are you doing that for?
Oh, yeah, I mean, a lot of people were asking about it, and then, as Katie says in the film, until you actually have a stake in it, you don't really fully understand, right? And so, and she's always been aware, and, really digs deep into these issues and things, but until she had her own children, until she married her husband, it was a different approach. And, your mama bear comes out when you see something like that happening to you, or, there's that scene that I hate that it's in there, but where I'm almost crying and I'm talking about an experience where I'm worried about my son, and that just came out of like, well, I'm going to use his white privilege. I mean, he's lucky enough to have white privilege. I'm lucky enough that he's got white privilege, to pass. And I recognize that's not the case for so many. And so that feels really, like, to me, I'm upset that I said that, but it's what I felt, because you want to protect them from situations. And he's experienced situations with us. And he's like, Mommy, is that racism? I'm like, yep, that's exactly what that was, And so, but we're hoping that the more and more people see this film, that they can at least maybe say, okay, well, I understand a little bit of this experience. If we had done a full-on, really hardcore investigative reporting kind of piece on this, then we wouldn't have the audience, right? Like, nobody's going to watch that. That wouldn't have already been thinking the same way. And so we're hoping this will give people an understanding to experiences that mixed race people have, interracial couples have, families like that have, that will help to open up the dialogue and at least maybe take a baby step forward in having these conversations.
You're not alone in that, and that Brenda and I have had the same conversation. Our son does present as white, and you talked about the feeling of guilt because you know that he has privilege that other boys who are just like him but darker wouldn't have.
Yes, I did. And Christina, when you and I spoke yesterday, you shared with me you know, a situation you face about going into a Black situation. And, you know, even though that's part of your heritage, not being able to identify that way physically.
It's, race is a social construct, like first and foremost. So, I am mixed. My heritage is mixed, my ancestry is mixed, my family is mixed. Everyone in my family looks completely different. I look very white, and I am treated very white. That is how the world sees me, that is how the world treats me, that's how they react to me. I can't presume to enter a space of Black people and relate to their experiences because I don't have the same experiences. People just don't treat me the same way. And I think one of the things you said a while ago, though, that I think you captured it. So, like, it's so difficult to have, like, starting these conversations, having these conversations, especially with your kids and them being age appropriate. Because how do you balance the appropriateness of things that are happening to them against the conversations that you have to have? And I don't know how to do that. I don't think any parent knows how to do that when you start the conversations. How deep do you go into the conversations? How do you explain things that have happened to them in a way that makes them, like, culturally competent and understand, like, the significance of it so they can react appropriately later on, so they don't, like, take it away as a joke later on and do it to somebody else? How do we balance all of those things?
Yeah, and I also think, you know, what's really important here is like the people of color or the mixed families will have these conversations. There's like, you know, there's no not having those conversations. It's the white people who don't have anybody else who should be also having those conversations with their own families and having, you know, teaching their kids about race at an early age. It's not just the people who are directly linked to it, you know. I mean, that way then, when our children get to school, I mean, where we live is the fourth most diverse city in America, and we chose to live there for a reason, you know. So there are a lot of people that look like me. There are a lot of my son's friends who look like him, and we don't know where they're from, and what their ethnic background is, and so it doesn't present that way there. But when we travel and when we go other places, that's when things start to come out.
You just use the phrase where they're from.
Yeah.
You intone that as really insulting when people say that to you or to your children or to other people who are of obvious biracial heritage. You said it takes away their humanness.
What are they is the question that my kids get, or like the kids get, or our children get. Where are you from is my generation. Like, you know, when a zero generation immigrant family here, that's what we would get all the time, you know. Where are you from? Well, Ohio. No, I remember years ago I was working at a gallery and I met this famous photographer, and I was glad that I didn't like his work after our conversation. I was like, there's a reason I didn't like your work. And, you know, and the first thing he said to me, you know, I've been working and I've been teaching for a long time. I was the director of the photo program at AU, and so I look young, but I, you know, had a lot of experience. And he came up to me and he was saying, like, where are you from? And I knew he meant, what's your ethnicity? But I was like, I'm so tired of this question. And I said, Ohio. And he was like, well, where are your parents from? And I was like, Ohio. Because I was like, I know what you're asking, but until you ask me correctly, I'm not going to answer. And then after that, he said, are you in this country looking for a husband? Oh. And then my boss came running. She like heard like what was happening, and she came running up because she was like, "Oh no, if Leena answers this is like gonna be big trouble, right?" And so you know, she was like, "No, Leena's the director of the photo program in American, and she doesn't need a husband. She doesn't, you know, like, you know, she was like just answering all these things, and
Was she
single on her own."
more embarrassed about it than you were?
Well, I think she was trying to mitigate the situation so that I didn't actually say what I wanted to say, and offend, you know, this famous photographer whose work we were showing at the gallery and all of that, and I think she was just like, okay, you go over here, you know, you calm down, because she was so frustrated. You know, I knew in the professional situation that that's what she needed to do, but I also have now just told the story 100 times in front of all the photography people I know and everybody who might know him, and so like, you know, I'm not afraid of holding back and telling he's King George Tice, you know,
Just drop that out.
yeah, I don't think he's alive anymore, so, but that's okay. But, you know, yeah, so I knew why she did that, and I understand that, and I also know, for me, what makes me feel comfortable when to pick my battles and when not to, you know, and so, there have been situations when my son has been there that we have actually, you know, said no and started, you know, yelling at somebody and saying things because we didn't want him to think that that was okay. Like for him to witness somebody talking to his parents or his grandmother, my mom, in a certain way, you know. So there are certain things that I might do professionally that I wouldn't do in front of him because I want him to learn to that this stuff is not okay.
The microphone is open for anybody that has a question for any of the panelists over there. While where Trish is, feel free. I'll follow you once you get there. Kind of interesting to me that all of the kids you profiled in the film, in the documentary, are kind of mixed kids of privilege. Was it difficult to find kids in a poor area? You know, because money
Yeah.
takes away a lot of the same.
Absolutely. We had reached out. There was a DC public school that was going to have a special sort of programming around this, and it was socioeconomic diversity. And we had tried, and the schools just wouldn't let us film there. So yes, that's definitely a situation. But when we did pre-interviews, some of the feedback that we got from the kids were like, we're just, you know, trying to figure out how to get a paycheck the next day, you know, or like, you know, how to eat food. We don't have time to think. That's a luxury to think about identity in these ways. And I always thought that was really like just so poignant that it is a luxury. It is a privilege to be able to have these kinds of conversations when other families are just really thinking about how to pay the rent and how to survive.
Larry, your kids are still single-digit age. Do you fear when they get to 11, get to 12, and you have to have that dad talk?
It's already coming.
Okay.
And,
At 7.
and that was at maybe 6.
Yeah.
And that was during a time where the conversation in the country was around the wall. And as Christina mentioned earlier, in elementary, we're talking what grade, Christina? First grade? First grade, other kids drawing a line in the sand saying, you can't cross this wall. And as at that point, we had to interject and talk about, this is what's happening. This is who our culture identifies us as and what the country sees us as. This is who you are. And it's hard. It gets emotional a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
We had our niece was living with us for a while, and she was going to high school with us, and they had rampant issues with racism there. And it's one of the things that we were super concerned with moving, and something that we're like careful and cautious of paying attention to. Not gonna lie, I'm worried about moving here. But it was another small, largely homogeneous town, and it was, I mean, every other day they were saying the N-word, or, you know, driving around the parking lot with the Confederate flag, or like, there was a girl at school who was told that she could only be a slave. And the school solution was to only talk to the black kids. So they brought in the Boys and Girls Club to have a special group with them. But with every incident that they had, all they did was handle it separately. There were no consequences to everyone else. They didn't have like any kind of, you know, general auditorium, talking to everyone. Like it just, they only address it with the children and people of color. It's never addressed with the broader population.
Brenda, at what point did you have a conversation out? Sorry.
I loved your film, and I have a zillion thoughts and comments watching it. Two things I wanted to mention as a parent, not just, I know this was about mixed families, but this also comes up when it comes to gender identity and that sort of thing, is the fact of social media and how that educates our children sometimes before we get to educate our children. And when you have that conversation about when do you have the conversation, and in your film you even mentioned some of the kids are already so aware of things that we growing up would have not been aware of because we weren't we didn't have those resources,
Yeah.
let's say,
Yeah.
the TikToks and the Instagrams of the world, that kind of informs their identity or their messed up version of an identity sometimes. That was one thing I was wondering if you had thought about delving into when you were having this conversation with these families.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are a lot of like memes and TikToks with the Indian accent and playing music, and my son was watching all of those, and we were like commenting about it and talking about it, and this is probably not appropriate, but the two of us like then put on the Indian accent and talk to each other, and no, we do not do it elsewhere. We do it amongst ourselves, but it's because of those things, and then we can talk about like, well, why is this meme like this, and this is why it's the stereotype of this person and things like that. So we can kind of get into it a little bit, but I do worry that because he doesn't look in like, in the summer he looks more Indian than he does in the winter, and if he goes out with his friends or his a recent experience that just happened, a friend of ours, one of his really good buddies, his dad took the two of them out to lunch, and the woman was asking, he was ordering wings, and he said, I want the spiciest wing, and the woman was like, are you sure you want them spicy? And he's like, I'm Indian, I can eat the spice. But then I just hope that people don't think that he's making fun or, doing that, because if he's not with me, then he may not present like that, he may not be like that, and people might think that he's being disrespectful or rude when he's actually just, no, this is who I am. So we do have those kinds of conversations. We talk about it, what's appropriate at home, and jokes and things that we say amongst ourselves, what's only home life and what can be outside life, from there. But social media, they will get to social media, they'll get it to them first. And as in the film, one of the families we talked to, they said that they've already figured out these, like our kids, by the time we have a conversation with them, they've already figured out some of these things. But the important thing is to still always have those conversations, because then they know that they can come to you to talk about this, even if it's past that, or if they have questions following something, or if you see something on TV and they're with you, and you can say, well, this I feel uncomfortable about this because of this. So, yeah.
If I could just make one more comment too, and that has to do, I appreciate the fact that you have the Houston publisher in there, and that story, I produce commercials as my day job, and part of that has to do with casting and copywriting, right? But it's for a national company, but we deal with local businesses, and to be able to normalize what a family looks like, and that not all families are homogenous, right? Is, I think, advertising's duty.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes to get small business owners to see who their audience is and not just see who they want to see, right? So I appreciate that you had that in there, because I think it's definitely something that advertising needs to be aware of. And I know they're trying, but it's a slow process that I think really needs to be addressed. But I appreciate that.
Thank you. We actually filmed, there's so much we couldn't include, but we got all of the people who wrote letters in support to the editor to come to the offices, and we had a big round table, and we filmed that whole thing with Scott there, and we couldn't use any of the well, we didn't use any of the footage, but it was so interesting because almost everybody who wrote to him said, well, my nephew's wife is this, and my nephew is that, so there was always some kind of like far away connection to it. And so we just thought that we just were really impressed that he took a stand. And I love the fact that he was just like, why can't we can get rid of you. We don't need you to be part of our, our readership, so.
Were there other parts that you wish now were in the film that you couldn't put in originally?
I loved everything we shot, so I wish that it would have been like
You wanted
a
3 hours.
4-hour film, exactly, a 4-hour film. I
it just makes more sense to me, and he's also autistic, to just hear it like point blank the way it is. So whenever we encounter a situation, I'll just stop and say, hey, that might appear this way because of this. And it helps him go through it. It helps him understand things better, and hopefully like learn as we go along. But I think it's such a unique personal thing for each person and family with how to deal with it. And probably like you had noticed, and because you were moving around with how different it is everywhere in the country.
Yeah.
And like what the tone of the area that you live in is, like have a different conversation. Like I would say really early in the school year here, this is our first year here, my son has a Black Lives Matter shirt, and there have been a lot of things going on locally very early when we got here. And one day he put it on and he got himself dressed. And one of the things that we have worked on with him is putting on a matching outfit. Like this is actually a thing that we have worked on, like in therapy. Like it's one of the things as an autistic kid that we help him learn those kinds of social nuances. So he put together this outfit, and it all matched well. It was fine. Like he was wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt. And I didn't know, I couldn't figure out how we wanted to have that conversation and how that conversation would impact him at school. So in that moment, like it was this choice of like, I made the decision to have him change that day, and I regret it. Like I actually don't know if I regret it or how I feel about it. Like it's still so complicated. But it was, do I let him think that his outfit didn't match, or do I just tell him straight up what it was? And at first he started to get upset because he thought he put together a really good outfit, and I was just like, no, this is why. I'm worried that if you wear that to school, other students are going to treat you differently, and you're brand new here, you've just gotten here. I don't know exactly what it's going to be like here, so let's not start that conversation yet. And I don't know what lesson I taught him that day, and I don't think I feel good about the lesson I taught him that day, but I also don't know that I necessarily want that to be the start of the school year.
Trish, I'm gonna be just like Matt Underwood was last night at the opening. How long are we supposed to do this?
Well, I think it can, it's about 10 to 1 right now. We had stated until about 1 o'clock, so whatever feels right in
Okay.
terms of how the conversation goes.
What I'd like to do is hear from all of us really, what would you like these folks to take away from, not just the film, but from this conversation? What would you like them to know that we did?
So we focused a lot on our experiences and relating to the film, but our experience here in Chagrin, right? And y'all can correct me, is it Chagrin or Chagrin?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, you're really tomato So, it has been great. There has been a lot of great experiences here with the community, and that just embraces our trust that we picked the right place, in my opinion, to move our family here. I invite, and I don't know anyone in this room, let's have dinner. Let's talk. Let's open up lines of communication, and it has nothing to do with who I like, what the color of my skin is. Just let's just have coffee and talk about life, and we'll find and make those connections between each other. And I think that is how we can, as a community or as a mixed family, can build and move past kind of like the speed bumps that in my opinion we're going through in our country.
Good job.
I think I would echo exactly what he said. When we first got here, we had a lot of concerns, but I feel like the overwhelming majority of the community has been extremely welcoming. A lot of people have reached out, like on the occasion that certain things have been said, or things that have happened in the few months that we've been here. The vast majority of the people here have been amazing and welcoming, and it does reinforce our decision to move here. And I would echo exactly what Larry's saying. Let's just talk, conversations. Please go on forward and have conversations. It's awkward. It's going to be awkward. The things that you say will be awkward. You're not going to know how to articulate it. It will be awkward. But if you don't have the conversations, you can't define it.
Yeah, I would just say talk about race. Like everybody should be talking about it. Even if it's in light forms like this film, if it's not a heavy hander. I loved that when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, that I read about her and Anthony Scalia's relationship, and that they were like, while they were fiercely opponents on the court, they like had dinner all the time together, and they were like very, very close confidants. And I love that idea of like reaching out to people that, let's not stay in our bubble. Let's like make friends that are not like us, that look differently than us, that are politically different than us, and start to have conversations, because that's where the change happens. If we just stay in here, we're not gonna get anywhere. We're all just gonna stay still here, and not like there.
Brenda, what would you like them to think of?
I think that, and this has been our experience, we've moved around the country as you did for jobs, but there are pockets of the country where people are very open about what they feel and regarding race, and they'll say it to your face, and then there are the people who don't express their opinions. And I would just, to echo everything they say, have the conversation, but be open about where you stand on the subject. Not in a vicious way, but say, I don't necessarily agree with your marriage. I don't necessarily agree with your politics. But then be open enough to listen to why somebody has chosen a lifestyle or chosen a life partner or a political stand. Be open about what you believe, but also be open enough to accept their views on things.
I want to go a whole different direction. You made the comment earlier about the Confederate flag. I don't know how many of you follow NASCAR, America's top racing venue. This weekend in Alabama, the first time in NASCAR history, a biracial driver won. The outpouring from the rest of the community and from the rest of the country, where we're seeing Bubba Wallace in victory lane, was just, I was almost moved to tears, the fact that so many people would cheer for this happening. There's a lot of boos, the race was in Alabama. There's a lot of people who weren't that thrilled, but by and large, as a country, we celebrated that. McDonald's, who was on this car, celebrated the most. But, yeah, the idea that we can come together really meant something. That's the conversation I want you to close this, because that's the conversation we need to have. We can all look up and see a biracial man standing there getting a trophy, and we can be happy for him.
Yeah.
That's where we need to go.
Yeah, I agree. But thank you so much, everybody, for coming and staying along, and thank you for these wonderful questions.
Thank you for making